In the heart of an alien gladiatorial arena, the crowd roared as Earth's last hope, a battered, bloodied soldier, stood against a towering Thalthari warrior. Dane's chances were slim to none, but if humanity had proven anything, it was that underestimating them was always a fatal mistake. "You call this a warship?" Dane Stryker scoffed, squinting up at the alien craft hovering ominously over Earth's capital. "Looks more like a floating frisbee." The crowd gathered behind him, uneasy murmurs rippling through the streets. Above them, the sleek Thalthari vessel cast a shadow over the skyline, its metallic hull gleaming with a cold, otherworldly menace. The ship was a statement: Earth had visitors, and they weren't here for a friendly exchange. "Cut the jokes, Stryker." Lieutenant Avery's voice was tense. "This isn't the time to poke fun at the aliens. They could blow us off the map before you finish your next wisecrack." Dane's grin faded as he turned to face his longtime friend. I know. But if I can't laugh about it, I might just panic like the rest of them." Avery scanned the crowd. Fear was spreading like wildfire, and Dane could hardly blame them. The Thalthari, an all-female race of towering warriors, had arrived with an ultimatum: Earth would face them in a series of trials, or surrender to their empire. These so-called duels were meant to be a test of Earth's worthiness to stand on its own. But there was no mistaking the challenge for anything less than an invitation to submission. "This isn't about winning," Avery muttered under her breath. "It's about survival." Before Dane could respond, a booming voice echoed from the sky. "Humans of Earth, prepare your champion." A ripple of shock ran through the crowd as a beam of light shot down from the Thalthari ship, landing directly in front of the assembled humans. Out of the light stepped Captain Zyra, leader of the Thalthari and a figure of legend in the galaxy. Her armor, a sleek amalgamation of alien tech and warlike efficiency, seemed to hum with power. She was easily twice the size of any human, her eyes burning with the fierce arrogance of someone who had never known defeat. "So, this is Earth's defense force?" Zyra's voice dripped with disdain as she eyed the gathered humans. "I expected more from a species that has survived this long." Dane couldn't resist. "Sorry we didn't roll out the red carpet." Zyra's eyes locked onto him, her expression unreadable. "You," she said, her voice sharp. "You will represent your planet in the first trial." The crowd gasped. Avery's hand shot to Dane's arm, gripping it tightly. "Don't do this. She's going to kill you." Dane swallowed hard, feeling the weight of hundreds of eyes on him. But something inside him clicked, an instinct for survival, yes, but also defiance. He had seen the way Zyra looked at Earth's people, as if they were beneath her. And that, more than anything, lit a fire in him. "I've never been much for duels," Dane said, stepping forward. "But I've also never been one to turn down a challenge." Zyra's lips curled into a predatory smile. "Then it's settled. You will face Varsha, one of my most accomplished warriors, in the arena. If you win, Earth survives for now." The beam of light expanded, surrounding both Zyra and Dane before pulling them up toward the alien vessel. The city below grew smaller, and with it, the weight of Dane's decision seemed to sink in. He was no warrior. He didn't have the technology or the strength of these aliens. But what he lacked in muscle, he made up for in ingenuity, and he was going to need every ounce of it. Inside the Thalthari ship, Dane found himself in a circular arena, the walls lined with alien spectators, each more fearsome than the last. Across from him, the hulking figure of Varsha appeared, muscular, battle-scarred, and armed to the teeth. "So," Varsha growled, cracking her knuckles, "you're the best Earth has to offer? This will be over quickly." Dane exhaled slowly, his mind racing. He didn't have a weapon, nor any armor. All he had was his wits and the promise of Earth's survival resting on his shoulders. He raised his hands, palms up, trying to buy time. "Funny thing about Earth," he said, voice steady. "We've been underestimated before." Varsha lunged, but Dane was already moving, dodging to the side as her massive fist slammed into the ground where he'd stood. He'd always been quick on his feet, but he needed more than speed to win this. His eyes scanned the arena, searching for something, anything, that could give him an edge. There, on the far side, a panel flickered, sparking slightly. It wasn't much, but it might be his only chance. As Vershaw charged again, Dane made his move, sprinting toward the panel. If he could disable it, maybe he could use the environment to his advantage. He wasn't strong, but he was clever. And that might be enough. The first duel had begun, and Dane's striker wasn't ready to die just yet. The hum of the arena's energy shield buzzed in Dane's striker's ears as he sprinted toward the flickering panel. The Thaltheri audience roared, their deep voices resonating through the metallic chamber, eager to witness their warrior crush the earthling who dared to defy them. "Where do you think you're going, little human?" Vershaw snarled, her voice echoing with menace. Dane didn't answer. He had no intention of engaging her in a physical brawl. He knew that would be suicide. Vershaw was a mountain of muscle, each step she took sending tremors through the ground. If she caught him, it would all be over in seconds. He had to be smarter, quicker, and a lot more resourceful. The panel was closer now, sparking and hissing from the earlier impact. His heart pounded, the sound of his own blood rushing through his ears almost drowning out the deafening crowd. Sweat beaded on his forehead, his mind racing through possibilities. If he could somehow disable the shield generator, maybe the arena itself could become his weapon. "Running won't save you," Vershaw sneered, closing the distance between them with terrifying speed. She lunged, her massive hand sweeping toward him like a wrecking ball. Dane dodged, feeling the gust of air from her swing as it missed him by mere inches. He hit the ground in a roll and skidded toward the panel. His fingers fumbled over the alien controls, symbols he didn't understand flashing in front of him. But desperation fueled his determination. One wrong move, and he'd be nothing more than a red smear on the arena floor. Behind him, Vershaw recovered, her footsteps growing heavier with each stride. Dane could feel the heat of her rage radiating toward him. He punched a random combination on the panel, hoping against hope it would do something, anything. The arena lights flickered, and for a brief moment, the energy shield sputtered. "Come on!" Dane muttered under his breath, frantically pressing more buttons. "Just give me one break." Suddenly, a section of the shield wall collapsed, leaving an exposed gap in the protective barrier. Dane's eyes widened. He didn't have long. Vershaw was nearly upon him. He dove through the opening, just as Vershaw's fist came crashing down where he'd been standing moments before. The floor trembled with the impact. Dane scrambled to his feet on the other side of the gap, breathing hard. For the first time, Vershaw hesitated, her eyes narrowing as she took in the broken shield. "You think you're clever," she growled. "But this won't save you. You cannot escape the Thaltheri." Dane wiped sweat from his brow, adrenaline surging through him. "Maybe I can't," he said, panting. "But I can make you work for it." The crowd had fallen into a tense silence, the weight of the moment palpable. The humans watching back on Earth, via live transmission, must have been holding their collective breath. Dane knew this was more than just a fight for his life, it was a symbol. If he lost, the Thaltheri would see humanity as weak, ripe for conquest. But if he could find a way to win... Vershaw stepped through the gap in the shield, her massive form dwarfing Dane. She cracked her knuckles, the sound like thunder in the confined space. "I'm going to enjoy breaking you." Dane's mind raced. The broken shield was a temporary advantage, but it wasn't enough. His eyes darted around the arena, searching for anything he could use. Then he saw it, a cluster of energy conduits running along the floor, just behind Vershaw. If he could overload them, maybe he could buy himself the time he needed. "You're making this too easy, Earthling," Vershaw taunted, sensing his distraction. She advanced, fists raised. Dane darted to the side, forcing Vershaw to follow. He kept moving, zigzagging, trying to lure her closer to the conduits. His breath was ragged, his muscles screaming in protest. But he had no choice. One misstep and he'd be crushed. Vershaw swung again, this time grazing his shoulder. Pain exploded down his arm, but Dane gritted his teeth and pushed through. He was almost there. Another step, just a little closer. "Enough games!" Vershaw roared, charging at him full force. In that split second, Dane dove forward, hitting the ground and rolling directly into the cluster of conduits. He grabbed one of the sparking cables, yanking it free from its housing just as Versha came crashing toward him. A blinding flash filled the arena as the conduits overloaded, sending arcs of electricity through the air. Versha's scream of rage was drowned out by the surge of energy that tore through the ground beneath her. She staggered, momentarily disoriented. Dane seized the opportunity. He scrambled to his feet, using the last of his strength to put distance between them. For now, he had survived. But the duel was far from over. Dane leaned heavily against the arena wall, his breaths coming in ragged gasps. The energy conduits crackled behind him, sending arcs of blue lightning through the air, casting a flickering glow over the battlefield. Versha, momentarily stunned by the overload, shook her head and snarled, her golden eyes burning with fury. Dane knew that temporary disorientation wouldn't last long. The Thalthari warrior growled, her voice rough and filled with anger. "You've made a fool's mistake, human. All you've done is delay your death." Dane grimaced, pressing his shoulder where Versha's earlier strike had grazed him. Pain throbbed in a dull, heavy pulse, but he couldn't focus on that now. His mind raced through options, but none seemed viable. Versha was too strong, too fast, and too relentless. "You really don't get tired, do you?" Dane muttered under his breath, forcing himself to stand straight. He knew his only hope was to keep her off balance, mentally more than physically. Versha lunged forward, her muscles rippling under her dark purple skin, each step shaking the arena floor. The audience was growing louder now, a mix of cheers and jeers that echoed through the chamber. They wanted blood, and Dane was the clear underdog. "Come on, Dane, think!" he whispered to himself as he dodged her charge, narrowly avoiding her outstretched hand. Sweat dripped down his face as he darted toward a cluster of debris on the far side of the arena. He needed a plan, but first, he needed to stay alive. Versha slammed into the wall where he had been standing moments before, her fist cratering the metal with ease. She spun on her heel, her eyes blazing with rage, and charged again. "You hide behind tricks and cowardice, Earthling!" Versha bellowed. "Face me like a true warrior!" Dane ignored her taunts. She wanted him to lose his cool, to face her head-on. But he wasn't a fool, there was no victory in brute strength alone. Instead, he ducked behind a fallen column, his hands searching frantically for anything he could use. His fingers grazed over a shard of metal, sharp and jagged. "Gotcha," he whispered, grabbing the shard. It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. He needed to create an opening, something that would turn the tide in his favor. He darted out from behind the column, sprinting toward Versha. She saw him coming and laughed, the sound echoing through the arena. "Finally!" she roared, bracing herself for the impact. But just as Dane closed the distance, he dropped to the ground, sliding between her legs and slicing the shard across the back of her calf. Versha howled in pain as she stumbled forward, her leg giving way beneath her massive frame. She crashed into the ground, sending a shockwave through the arena floor. Dane didn't waste a second. He scrambled to his feet and rushed toward the cluster of energy conduits again. If he could reactivate them, maybe he could overload more of the arena's systems. But as he reached for the sparking cables, Versha's massive hand shot out, grabbing his ankle. "Not so fast!" she snarled, her grip like a vice. She yanked him backward, slamming him onto the hard metal floor. The impact knocked the wind out of him, his vision swimming as pain erupted in his back. He struggled to breathe, panic rising in his chest. Versha stood over him now, her injured leg bleeding but still functional. Her face was twisted in rage, her golden eyes filled with fury. "You think you can win with tricks, Earthling?" she spat. "I'll crush you like the insect you are." Dane gasped, his mind racing. He needed to stay calm, to think clearly. He couldn't overpower her, but maybe he didn't need to. "You talk too much," he groaned, using the last of his strength to roll toward the energy conduits. His fingers brushed against the cables, and with a desperate yank, he pulled them free again. The arena lights flickered, and another surge of energy erupted from the conduits, sending a blast of electricity through the floor. Varsha roared in pain, her body convulsing as the shockwave hit her. Dane felt the jolt too, but he gritted his teeth and forced himself to keep moving, crawling away from the epicenter. Varsha staggered, smoke rising from her skin as she struggled to stay upright. Dane knew this was his moment, his one chance to turn the tide completely. Ignoring the searing pain in his body, he rose to his feet and charged at her with everything he had left. Varsha, disoriented and weakened, barely had time to react before Dane tackled her, sending both of them crashing into the still sparking energy conduits. The arena exploded in a shower of sparks and fire as the conduits overloaded once more, the energy shield collapsing entirely. The crowd erupted into chaos as the once controlled environment turned into a battlefield of destruction. For a moment, everything went dark. Dane's vision slowly cleared, revealing a chaotic scene of flickering lights, smoke, and debris. He coughed, the acrid taste of burnt wiring filling his lungs. His body ached, and his limbs felt like lead, but he had no time to linger. Varsha was still standing, barely, but standing nonetheless. Through the smoke, Dane saw the towering Thalthari warrior, her purple skin charred from the energy blasts, her breath labored but determined. She turned toward him, her eyes burning with a mix of fury and desperation. The once invincible warrior was faltering. This was it, his last chance. Varsha limped toward him, her injured leg dragging slightly, but her hands were still raised in combat. "You won't win," she hissed, each word strained with effort. "Humanity is weak. You are weak." Dane wiped the blood from his brow, his muscles trembling as he forced himself to his feet. "You know what the problem with your kind is," he said, his voice hoarse but resolute. "You think strength is all that matters." Varsha sneered, though the fire in her eyes dimmed just a fraction. "Strength is all that matters." "Maybe," Dane replied, taking a step forward, his hands curling into fists. "But you're about to learn what else humanity has in spades." With that, he rushed toward her, his body moving with every ounce of willpower he had left. Varsha swung wildly, but Dane ducked, sidestepping her clumsy attack. He slammed his fist into her injured leg, causing her to howl in pain. She swung again, but her movements were slower now, less precise. The toll of the battle was catching up to her. Dane circled her, his mind racing. He couldn't rely on brute force, he had to outthink her. As she turned to face him again, he spotted the remains of the energy conduits behind her, still sparking and unstable. That was his opening. "Come on, Varsha," Dane taunted, his breath shallow. "Is that all you've got?" With a roar, Varsha lunged at him, her speed returning in a final burst of adrenaline. Dane waited until the last second, then dove to the side, rolling across the debris-covered floor. Varsha crashed into the conduits, her momentum carrying her straight into the cluster of sparking cables. The instant she made contact, the conduits exploded in a flash of light and energy. Varsha screamed as the electrical surge coursed through her, lighting up her body in a crackling arc of blue and white. The arena trembled with the force of the blast, and for a moment, it felt as if the entire structure might collapse. Dane shielded his eyes from the light, his heart racing. When the smoke cleared, Varsha lay crumpled on the ground, motionless. Sparks danced across her body, but there was no movement, no sign of life. For a moment, silence reigned. Dane staggered forward, his legs weak beneath him. He stood over Varsha's body, the realization slowly sinking in. He had won. Against all odds, he had defeated the seemingly unstoppable warrior. But as the victory began to sink in, a new sound reached his ears, the slow, rhythmic clap of hands. Dane turned to see the overseer, perched high in the viewing gallery above the arena, clapping slowly, a twisted smile on his face. "Well done, human," the overseer said, his voice booming over the arena. "You've survived where so many have fallen. I must say, you are full of surprises." Dane clenched his fists, his anger rising again. "This wasn't a fight, it was a slaughter for your entertainment." The overseer's grin widened. "Perhaps. But you've proven something today. Humanity, weak as it may seem, has a spark of resilience, of unpredictability that we underestimated. He paused, leaning forward with cold amusement in his eyes. You've won this battle. But the war is far from over. Dane's heart sank at those words. There was always another fight, another challenge. But he wasn't done yet. You think this is a game? You think we're just here for your amusement? He shouted, his voice echoing through the ruined arena. Well, we're not going anywhere. And one day, we'll tear down this whole twisted system. The overseer chuckled darkly. Perhaps. But for now, savor your victory, human. It may be the last one you see. With that, the overseer's image flickered and disappeared, leaving Dane alone in the broken arena. Exhausted, he sank to his knees, the weight of everything finally hitting him. He had survived, but at what cost? As the dust settled, the sound of distant footsteps reached his ears. Reinforcements, or perhaps a new enemy? He didn't know. But whatever was coming next, Dane knew one thing for sure: he wasn't going to stop fighting. Not today. Not ever.